You're smart, emotionally aware, and constantly trying to date better. But somehow you keep ending up drained, over explaining, or ignoring your gut. Here's why intelligence can actually make dating harder and what to do instead.
By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to recognize when your gut is signaling a boundary issue that could be sabotaging your relationships before you waste months with the wrong person or burn out on dating altogether.
Hi, friends, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome to our community. I'm Tehrina.
And I'm Joel. We're licensed therapists, and together we help you decode the ABCs of relationships: attachment, boundaries, and communication, so you can stop second guessing and start connecting. Before we dive into today's topic, we'd like to ask a small favor. If you're finding value in these relationship insights and you want to support our work, the simplest way you can do that is by hitting the subscribe button.
Our commitment to you is that if you subscribe, we'll continue creating content that directly addresses your relationship questions and challenges. We read every comment, we take your feedback to heart, and we're dedicated to making each video more helpful than the last. We want to be your trusted guides on this journey toward healthier relationships, and your subscription helps make that possible.
Thank you for being a part of our community. Now, let's get back to today's topic.
Today, we're kicking off our new Are You Too Smart for Your Own Good series, where we explore how intelligence sometimes creates unique relationship blind spots. In this series, we're really diving into boundaries, the B in our ABCs of healthy relationships, focusing specifically on how even the smartest people can miss critical boundary signals when dating. This isn't about obvious boundary violations. It's about those subtle internal red flags that your intuition picks up on, but your conscious mind often dismisses.
So, let's first take a moment to explain why boundaries are so foundational in dating. Think of boundaries as your relationship immune system. They protect your emotional well being, your authentic self, and your capacity to give genuinely in relationships. Without this internal guidance system functioning properly, you can find yourself making the same relationship mistakes repeatedly, even when you intellectually know better.
What makes these boundary red flags so tricky is that they often disguise themselves as normal dating experiences. You might think, dating is just draining sometimes, or it's normal to worry about what they think, without recognizing these are actually important signals from your internal wisdom. When smart, intuitive people ignore these signals repeatedly, it creates a disconnect between your authentic needs and your dating behavior, a recipe for burnout, resentment, and settling in relationships that don't truly fulfill you.
We've identified three subtle but critical boundary red flags that even the most self aware people tend to overlook. Understanding these signals could completely transform your dating experience by helping you honor your authentic needs from the very beginning. Let's explore these overlooked warning signs and why they deserve your immediate attention.
The first red flag that intelligent people frequently dismiss is that feeling of lingering resentment or irritation after an interaction. What makes this particularly deceptive is that on the surface, the date might have seemed perfectly fine, perhaps even enjoyable. You said yes to everything, smiled at the right times, and went along with their suggestions. Objectively, nothing bad happened.
But then comes the nagging feeling hours later, or even the next morning. Maybe you feel unusually tired, slightly annoyed, or just emotionally flat when you think about them. Many people, especially those who pride themselves on being rational, will override this feeling, thinking, but they were so nice, or I'm just being too picky, or dating is supposed to be challenging.
But here's what's actually happening. Your body's boundary detection system is far more sophisticated than your conscious mind. Research shows that our nervous system processes relationship dynamics before our analytical brain catches up. That resentment is actually valuable data telling you that somewhere in the interaction, your authentic self was overridden.
Perhaps you agreed to a restaurant that didn't align with your dietary preferences because you didn't want to seem difficult. Maybe you laughed off a comment that was subtly dismissive, or possibly you shared personal information before you felt really ready because the conversation seemed to be heading in that direction. Whatever the specific trigger, your internal wisdom recognized a misalignment between your authentic needs and your behavior.
Smart people are particularly susceptible to ignoring this signal because they often pride themselves on being reasonable and flexible. But honoring this feeling, even when you can't immediately identify its source, is actually a sign of emotional intelligence, not irrationality. This isn't about being difficult. It's about developing trust in your internal guidance system, which often perceives relationship dynamics that your conscious mind hasn't yet processed.
The second boundary red flag that even highly intelligent people frequently miss is the habit of over explaining or excessively justifying their needs or preferences. This is particularly insidious because it often masquerades as good communication.
Think about your recent dating interactions. When you needed to decline a date, set a limit, or express a preference, did you find yourself creating elaborate explanations? Perhaps sending paragraph long texts explaining why you couldn't meet up, or feeling compelled to provide multiple reasons for a simple preference, as if one valid reason wasn't enough.
This pattern is easy to rationalize, especially for articulate, thoughtful people. You might tell yourself, I'm just being thorough, or clear communication is important. But when you examine this behavior more closely, it reveals something deeper, an underlying belief that your needs, preferences, or boundaries require justification to be valid.
This is a critical red flag because it suggests you don't fully trust your inherent right to have boundaries. Instead, you're operating from the assumption that your boundaries are only acceptable if they're thoroughly explained and deemed reasonable by the other person. This puts the authority for your needs outside of yourself, a fundamental boundary issue that smart people often miss because they value being understood and avoid appearing difficult.
And the truth is, while clear communication is certainly important in relationships, there's a profound difference between clear communication and feeling obligated to build a case for your basic needs and preferences. A healthy boundary, kindly and clearly stated, is complete in itself. I'm not available Thursday evening is a complete communication. I prefer not to discuss that topic yet is a valid statement that requires no additional justification.
When you consistently feel the need to over-explain, it's a signal that you might be giving others veto power over your boundaries, waiting for their understanding or approval before you feel entitled to your own limits. This pattern not only undermines your authority in relationships, but ironically makes your boundaries less clear as the essential message gets buried under explanations and qualifications.
The third and perhaps most subtle red flag that smart, empathetic people consistently overlook is the unconscious belief that you're responsible for managing other people's emotional responses to your boundaries. This boundary issue is particularly deceptive because it can feel like empathy, care, or social intelligence.
You might notice this pattern when you find yourself hesitating to express a need, set a limit, or be authentic about your feelings because you're preemptively concerned about how the other person might react. Maybe you've stayed in dating situations longer than felt right because you were worried about disappointing them. Or perhaps you've agreed to things that didn't feel aligned with your values because you wanted to avoid potential conflict or their discomfort.
Highly intelligent, especially emotionally intelligent people, are particularly vulnerable to this boundary confusion because they can often accurately anticipate others' reactions. You can imagine their disappointment, hurt, or frustration so vividly that it almost feels like you're already causing it just by contemplating setting that boundary. This capacity for perspective taking is actually a remarkable strength, but when misapplied, it becomes a boundary red flag that keeps you from honoring your own authentic needs.
Here's the critical distinction intelligent people often miss. Being considerate of someone's feelings is healthy and appropriate, but believing you're responsible for managing or preventing their emotional reactions is a boundary issue. In healthy relationships, each person owns their emotional responses. When you set a boundary and the other person feels disappointed, that disappointment is theirs to process, not a problem you need to fix by retracting or diluting your boundary.
The subtle red flag isn't your capacity for empathy. It's when that empathy extends into believing it's your job to protect others from experiencing natural emotional reactions to your authentic needs and limits. This pattern often develops in people who were emotionally intelligent from a young age and learned that they could keep relationships harmonious by managing others' feelings, even at their own expense.
Now, it's crucial to understand that the three red flags we've just discussed, that lingering resentment, the tendency to over-explain, and feeling responsible for others' emotions, are primarily internal signals. They reveal patterns within your relationship with yourself that intelligent, self-aware people often miss or rationalize away.
However, we need to make an important distinction between these internal boundary signals and situations where someone's actively disrespecting your boundaries you've clearly communicated. The experience feels fundamentally different. When someone's pushing against your clear stated boundaries, you'll likely notice persistent pressure, subtle dismissal when you express your limits, feeling unheard, or experiencing manipulation or guilt tripping when you try to maintain your position. You might find yourself stating the same boundary repeatedly, only to have it tested again.
Smart people sometimes confuse these experiences, thinking, well, maybe I'm not communicating clearly enough, or perhaps I'm overreacting when their boundaries are actually being violated. This confusion often happens because emotionally intelligent people tend to look inward first, examining their own communication or reactions before considering that the other person might simply not be respecting clearly stated limits.
The key insight here is that awareness of both is crucial. Recognizing your internal boundary signals is essential for personal growth, while identifying external boundary violations is vital for protecting yourself in relationships. The distinction matters because the appropriate response differs. Internal boundary signals require self-awareness and personal growth work, while persistent external boundary pushing often requires firmer communication, increased distance, or potentially ending the connection if the pattern continues.
Okay, so whether you're recognizing some of these internal signs within yourself or identifying patterns where others might be externally pushing our boundaries, the common thread here is that awareness is the essential first step. Noticing these patterns, the resentment, the overthinking, the taking responsibility for others' feelings, or the feeling of being pressured. It's not about assigning blame to yourself or anyone else. It's purely about gaining understanding. These internal patterns, especially, are often learned behaviors, perhaps picked up from family dynamics or past relationship experiences.
And the truly good news is that this awareness is incredibly empowering. Once you recognize these signs, you can start making conscious small shifts. You can begin strengthening your internal boundaries one conversation, one decision at a time. And you can also become clearer and more confident in recognizing when the issue isn't internal, but rather requires you to address external disrespect.
This isn't just crucial for avoiding dating burnout and frustration. It's fundamental to attracting and building the kind of secure, respectful, and reciprocal relationships you truly deserve. Please remember, this is a learning process. Managing boundaries effectively is a skill, and like any skill, it develops with practice and self-compassion. So please be patient with yourself as you learn and grow.
From a neurobiological perspective, these boundary red flags make perfect sense. When we examine what happens in the brain during boundary navigation, we find fascinating patterns that explain why even the most intelligent people struggle with these signals. Research on interpersonal neurobiology shows that our brains are wired for connection and belonging from our earliest development. Studies demonstrate that the threat of social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. This explains why boundary setting can feel genuinely threatening. Your brain may actually be trying to process potential disappointment from others as a form of danger. What's particularly interesting is how this manifests differently in highly intelligent individuals. Research from relationship psychology suggests that people with strong analytical abilities often over-rely on their prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking center, when navigating relationships. However, boundary signals frequently originate in the limbic system and the body through emotional and physiological responses like that lingering resentment we discussed. This creates a disconnect where smart people might intellectually override important emotional data. Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory provides further insights. Our nervous system constantly scans for safety in relationships, and when boundaries are unclear, we remain in a low-grade stress response. This explains the fatigue many people experience after dates where their boundaries weren't honored, even if nothing overtly negative occurred. Attachment research from Dr. Sue Johnson's work reveals another layer. Securely attached individuals don't fear boundary setting because they trust both themselves and others to withstand the natural tension that arises. This reveals that clear boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're actually the foundation that makes genuine intimacy possible. Perhaps most compelling is Gottman's longitudinal research showing that couples who demonstrate respect for each other's boundaries in the early stages of dating have significantly higher relationship satisfaction years later. The boundaries you establish now are literally creating the template for your future relationship dynamics.
So let's get to the heart of it. When we talk about these boundary red flags, what we're really discussing is the relationship you have with yourself. Your gut always knows when something doesn't feel quite right. That feeling of resentment, the impulse to over-explain, the worry about their reactions. These aren't just random responses. They're your inner wisdom trying to protect your authentic self. What makes these signals so easy to ignore, especially for intelligent, thoughtful people, is that they're subtle and often contradicted by what seems reasonable on the surface. It's reasonable to be flexible, to explain yourself clearly, to care about others' feelings. But there's a crucial line where these positive qualities transform into boundary issues that disconnect you from your own truth. The heart of healthy boundaries isn't about building walls or becoming rigid. It's about developing a profound trust in your internal signals and honoring them even when you can't fully articulate why they matter. It's understanding that your needs and limits are valid simply because they're yours, not because you can justify them to someone else. Dating shouldn't leave you feeling depleted, constantly explaining yourself or walking on eggshells around others' feelings. It should be a journey of authentic connection where both people have the freedom to be genuine, where communication flows from self-awareness rather than self-doubt. If you recognized yourself in any of these patterns today, know that this isn't about labeling yourself as having bad boundaries. It's about recognizing that your inner guidance system is working perfectly. Those feelings of resentment, the tendency to over-explain, the worry about others' reactions, these are all valuable messengers trying to reconnect you with your authentic needs and limits. Each time you notice one of these signals and choose to honor it, perhaps by acknowledging that post-date resentment, sending a brief no without extensive justification, or allowing someone to have their natural reaction to your boundary, you're strengthening your relationship with yourself and creating the foundation for truly fulfilling connections with others.
And if you're realizing that your dating boundaries could use some strengthening, we've created something to help. Our relationship guide for must-haves and deal breakers will help you clarify your non-negotiable boundaries in relationships and recognize what you truly need for a fulfilling connection. This practical guide gives you a framework for making dating decisions from a place of self-trust rather than overthinking. You can download it for free using the link in the description below.
We're really curious to hear from you now. Which of these internal signals, the resentment, the over-explaining, the feeling responsible, resonates most strongly with your own dating experiences? Or perhaps you've distinctly felt that experience of someone externally pushing your boundaries. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comment section below. Reading through the comments is often so validating to others, and we can definitely all learn from each other's journeys.
In our next video of the Are You Too Smart for Your Own Good series, we're exploring why smart couples stop wanting each other, where we'll reveal how boundary issues affect desire in committed relationships. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that insight into maintaining passion while protecting your authentic self.
And if you can't wait and you want to continue creating healthier relationships right now, check out this video next.
Your time is valuable. Thank you for spending some of it with us today. If you found this helpful, please give it a like. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar patterns, please share this video. It could provide the understanding they need.
Subscribe and take care of your heart. And remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together.